I have ranked every Salah and Son replacement in FPL to identify who we should be buying, and I think we finally have a winner. So as always, make sure we do drop a like, smash that subscribe button on this video. Without further ado, let's get into this video. So first up, before we can even consider buying our replacements for Son and Salah, we need to get an understanding on the most recent update of a certain Erling Haaland. This is a tweet taken from Man City's account, and it clearly shows Erling Haaland back in training. And why is this important? Well, we're going to want Erling Haaland back in our FPL teams. And if we do sell Son and Salah to some expensive players, it may block you from buying Erling Haaland from game week 21 onwards. Now, Man City do have an FA Cup game this weekend, and that should give us a bit of a clearer indication whether he is going to be available for game week 21. But whether you want to buy Haaland this weekend or you want to buy him in game week 22, that doesn't change the fact that we need to be understanding of how much we are spending on our Son and Salah replacements, because if you spend too much, it might mean you can't buy Erling Haaland. And I think of all the FPL players in the game, he is going to be the most essential over this AFCON and Asia Cup period. So that's the latest on Erling Haaland. Let's get into these rankings. Now in this video, we are looking at 13 FPL players as potential replacements for Salah and Son. So rather than just listing down 13 players generically, I thought I'd break it down by price points, because I think managers want to look at particular areas. Some want to go big, some want to spend a little bit less. So I'm going to give you the best players at each price point, and then of course we will come to a final overall rank at the end. So first up, the budget enablers. We have Cole Palmer, Douglas Luiz and Pedro Neto, and as you can see, I have already ranked them, but I'm going to explain exactly why they are ranked where they are, so make sure you do stick around. First up, Pedro Neto, 5.6 million, a player who started the season in unbelievable form with 8 assists in his opening 10 league starts, and then unfortunately suffered an injury. Now we are seeing the return of Pedro Neto, which is a real positive thing. We need to remember, at 5.6 million, this was a player that all of us kind of wanted at our teams at the start of the year. And the great thing about both Neto and Wolves is that we've seen a real improvement in Wolves as a general team. Whereas before, I think we were buying Neto in a Wolves team that we felt were going to be relegation candidates. We're now looking at a Pedro Neto with a Wolves team that are doing really well, and you fancy them on their day to pick up points against any team in the league, or at least contribute in attacking returns. Now, looking at Neto's underlying numbers, they always have been pretty poor from a goal threat perspective at 0.18 XG per 90, but his creativity is why we target him. 0.28 XA per 90 is really solid, hence the 8 assists in his opening 10 league matches, although he was slightly overperforming. So I really do like Neto as a pick in a real good Wolves team, but the only problem is he is coming back from a long-term injury. We don't really know how Gary O'Neill is going to integrate him back into the team. But what we do know is, if he had to pick a cup final team, I think Neto does make the starting 11, but that doesn't mean he's automatically going to come in the team and play 90 minutes each and every week. And it's also worth noting the fixtures coming up for Wolves aren't the best, so I don't think it is necessarily the time to jump in on Neto as of game week 21. I think we put him on a watch list and we have him as a target later down the line when the fixtures start to swing. Now, number 2 is going to be my enemy in Douglas Luiz. And the reason why I called him my enemy is because he continues to return, even though he doesn't necessarily accumulate massive chances in open play. So first up, let's cover off the good stuff. 0.29 XG per 90 looks fantastic, and rightly so. At 5.5 million, he has been a brilliant asset. But when we do deep dive a little bit closer to his expected goals when we take penalties out of the equation, it's only at 0.12. So if he doesn't get a penalty or set pieces, he isn't necessarily the best FPL option. But luckily for him, Aston Villa have had a lot of penalties this season, and another one happened in game week 20. And in terms of creativity, not the best at 0.14 expected assists per 90. But as I mentioned, he is a penalty taker, and at 5.5 million in a great Aston Villa team, that shouldn't be looked at as a negative factor. And also, the Aston Villa fixtures long-term are really, really good as well. So I don't mind Douglas Luiz at all. I think I'm one of those managers, though, that keeps looking at it thinking they can't continue to get penalties. And when we take the penalties out, I don't think he has the high ceiling that some other options do have in the game. And one of those players that I think just trumps both of these is going to be Cole Palmer. Now, when we're talking about FPL gems, I look at it back in the years gone by. We look at Mahrez, we look at Vardy in that Leicester season. We look at Harry Kane when he was a cheap forward for Spurs. I'm not putting Cole Palmer in that bracket, but sometimes we need to just kind of Take away all the negatives out of a player and look at it as exactly what it is. This is a 5.6 million midfielder playing for not a top team in the league, but a good team in the league who can score goals. And also the penalty taker, an absolute bonus on top of all these good things. 0.51 xg per 90. Now again, you're probably sat there thinking, yes, but he takes penalties. Well, it's not as dramatic as Douglas Luiz's drop off. His xg per 90 non-pen is actually 0.28, so still decent underlying numbers, not the greatest though, and an expected assist of 0.34 per 90. Really good creative numbers, it is worth noting. The penalty taker, 4 double-digit hauls this season, so he is right in and amongst it. The only problem is Chelsea's long-term fixtures aren't the best, but what I would say with Chelsea, even though they have been a team that have been very, very difficult to predict, I do fancy them on any day to actually score goals. I know we've had problems against low-block teams, and I think that is still a problem, but I think we are seeing a slight improvement in Chelsea, and I think Cole Palmer is going to play the majority of minutes, even though there is a lot of competition in this Chelsea team. I think he's one of the few players that Poch can't afford to take out of their team. So if you're looking for a budget enabler, sub 6 million, I don't think you need to overthink it. If you have Cole Palmer in your team, you go for Douglas Luiz. If you don't have Cole Palmer, this should be one of the most obvious transfers in your team. And I think it is just one of those where he's going to become template if he isn't already. Okay, next up, moving into the 6 to 6.5 million midfielders. Yes, I have kind of created a category here, but there was a few options that we needed to discuss, and this was the only way that I could fit them in. So of the pick here, we have got Anthony Gordon, Eze, and Pascal Gross. So first up, we'll touch on Pascal Gross, as he is third on this list, the most expensive at 6.4 million. But the reason why we all want a Brighton player in our teams is because of the unbelievable fixtures that they do have coming up. They are top of the ticker for the next 6 to 8 game weeks, and it's really unfortunate that likes of Matoma and Adingra are going off to the Asia Cup and African Cup of Nations, because we all would have been steaming in on some of those assets. But now we're looking at the Brighton team thinking, who can we really buy? And I think the only one from a midfield perspective that we can consider is going to be Pascal Gross. Now, when we look at his underlying numbers, they don't scream FPL value to me. 0.21 xg per 90, 0.22 expected assists per 90. If he was 5.4 million, 5 million, these are decent underlying numbers, but he is the most expensive at 6.4 million, and we do need to consider that when we are looking at these. Now, he is a bonus point magnet, which is really important, 0.87 bonus per 90, so he does get in and amongst it. He does the good stuff on the pitch because he plays a majority of minutes, and he's busy. He's a busy player, and as we mentioned, the amazing fixtures. The problem with Pascal Gross is because he is so important to De Zerbi, he just finds a way to play Pascal Gross, and that gives us a bit of an uncertainty on his position. Plays at right back sometimes when they require it. He plays at the right of a front three. He can play in the centre pivot. And because of that uncertainty, I don't really feel confident buying someone like a Pascal Gross, knowing that if they were to get an injury somewhere, he would be the obvious man to slot in that position. And then that could negate any sort of attacking potential that he does offer. So even though Pascal Gross gives you an opportunity to buy into the Brighton team, I don't think he is worth the money. I would much rather you go to Estupinan in defence at 4.9 million, because I actually think he offers more attacking potential than Pascal Gross, and therefore, if they do pick up a clean sheet, real high FPL ceiling. So Pascal Gross is third on the list, but I'm not really a big fan of him. Second, though, on the list is going to be Eze at 6 million, a player that's come back from an injury, and he is definitely on a lot of FPL managers' radars. 0.39 xg per 90, 0.22 expected assists per 90. Decent underlying numbers, but again, remember, he has been on penalties, so it is slightly skewing the underlying numbers here. But what we do need to note is the previous games gone by, Elise has been on the field and taken a penalty while Eze is being there. So we do need to monitor whether Eze is still the penalty taker in this Crystal Palace team. Great long-term fixtures for Crystal Palace. So if you are looking to buy a player, I think the time is now to get on them. The only problem with Crystal Palace in general and Eze, Crystal Palace don't put up high XG in games, only 1.33 XG as a team per 90 minutes. So we're not getting huge chances in this team, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because if they are going to score goals, we do expect Eze to be in and amongst it, and therefore on the bonus points. The other problem is, I think Elise is a better option. Now, for those that don't know, Elise did pick up a hamstring injury. We don't really know the extent of it, but if Elise is out of the team, I think that gives Eze worse potential as an FPL option, because he doesn't have the creativity of Elise, and it means teams are just going to basically double up on Eze because they know he's their main enforcer in terms of creativity. But I think once Elise is available, I think you just rather have Elise at a slightly cheaper price, but also better underlying numbers in terms of XG per 90 and expected assists. So if we get confirmation that Elise is available, I actually think that means Elise jumps Eze and even gets himself joint first on this list. But while we have the information that we do, I'm going to put Eze as number 2. And number 1 might surprise you, is going to be Anthony Gordon. And the reason being is because, of course, the recent form of Newcastle. I believe they've lost 4 of the last 5 league games. I think all of us are looking to sell our Newcastle players. But if I was buying right now, I think I still would go for Anthony Gordon. 0.31 XG per 90, 0.26 expected assists per 90. Really good underlying numbers. And also we need to remember Harvey Barnes is ruled out for at least another month, I believe. So it means Anthony Gordon's game time is pretty locked in. And I wouldn't even be surprised once Barnes is back for them to push Gordon out onto the right-hand side to fix the issues that they do have there. 11 returns and 19 starts is fantastic. And also he is playing in a team that accumulate a lot of XG in games. 2.11 XG per 90 is really solid numbers for this Newcastle team. Now, yes, they have regressed over the last few weeks, but I don't think Newcastle are in this slump for long term. I think they're in a little bit of a bad spell, but we are going to see a return to Newcastle. Maybe not the levels of the overperformance, but a decent Newcastle team nonetheless. Now, the only problem with it, tricky short-term fixtures against the likes of Man City and Aston Villa. Don't think it is necessarily the most opportunistic time to buy Anthony Gordon, but I do think long-term he is still the hold to go for. So Gordon is number 1, but if Elise is confirmed fit, between 6 and 6.5 million, I think Elise would actually be my number 1 option, but we need to monitor that hamstring situation. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So now onto the part of the video that I imagine you have been waiting for, the mid-price midfielders. Or is that what we class them nowadays? Basically the popular midfielders, the assets that most FPL managers are going towards. And a lot of these are some of the highest transfers in going into game week 21 already. And I understand it because at the price point that they offer an amazing FPL value. So as you can see here, we have 4 picks in this bracket. We have Diego Jota, Foden, Richarlison, and Bowen. So first off, we'll kick off with Diego Jota, 7.7 million. Now, of course, probably historically not necessarily an FPL option that we want to consider because of the rotation. But while Salah is at the African Cup of Nations, we are expecting Jota to have an improvement in his minutes. 0.48 XG per 90 is decent numbers, and 0.22 expected assists per 90. When Jota plays for Liverpool, he is a brilliant FPL option. I don't think anybody is denying that. And that is reflected in an attack and return every 73 minutes. So really good underlying numbers. And as we discussed, we want to buy players for teams that have actually accumulated chances throughout the game. And Liverpool is one of those. 2.31 XG per 90. They are top 4 XG every 90 minutes, which is really important because when we are looking at a team, I want to buy players in a team that is actually going to create chances, and Liverpool are one of those. The big issue with Diego Jota, what actually are his minutes? We don't really know. Even though Mohamed Salah is going off, and we would just probably expect Jota to come in, Darwin Núñez can play 9. Gakpo can play 9 or down the left. Luis Diaz off the left. Harvey Elliott can play right wing. Szoboszlai can play right wing. So we don't have any actual guarantee that Diego Jota is just going to waltz in, play 80 minutes every single week in that front 3. Now, if I had to guess, I do think Jota's minutes are going to improve, but I just don't really have any confidence in Klopp that he is going to play Jota every single game down the middle, because that is exactly where I want him. I don't think Darwin Núñez is doing a terrible job for him to come out of the team immediately. So I love Jota. If I knew that he was going to play week in, week out every minute, I think he would jump straight to the front of this ranking. But until we get that kind of clarification, he's going to be 4th on this list. Now, number 3, and it kills me to put him here, is going to be Phil Foden at 7.8 million. One of the form players of the season so far, and we're really seeing the best of Phil Foden in the last month, I would say, playing in those little pocket areas on the half turn, driving Man City up the pitch and just enjoying his football, which is great to see. 0.27 XG per 90, 0.27 expected assists per 90. Even though he is playing phenomenal, his underlying numbers are always underwhelming, I find, especially for a player playing in a Man City team that score a bag full of goals. Now, he is good on the bonus, 0.71 bonus per 90. So if he does get an attacker return, you usually can expect Phil Foden to pick up a bonus point, which is always a positive, because somebody like Jarrod Bowen, for example, he actually does need to get multiple attacker returns to actually get in and amongst the bonus points. So that is quite an important factor. And also, the Man City fixtures are really, really good. So I think Man City are a team that we all want to buy into, and we all are going to get Erling Haaland once he does return. But in order to get the full benefit of Man City, you do need to have that second attacker. And if we are buying one right now, I do think Phil Foden is that man at 7.8 million. The only negatives about Phil Foden, the return of KDB, Kevin De Bruyne. Do we see Kevin De Bruyne replace Phil Foden? I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I also don't think that Alvarez is just going to be completely bombed out the team and plays 0 minutes. I personally want to see how this Man City team sets up with the return of De Bruyne and how Phil Foden does integrate into that team. And also, with the return of Erling Haaland, we're going to see the team just completely filter everything through him. Is that going to enhance Foden as an asset? Because he thrived in the absence of Haaland. Again, more uncertainties that give me a little bit of doubt about buying Phil Foden into our teams. And as I already discussed, the lack of goal threat. If he is in this team, I want to see that XG around 0.4 per 90, but we're not really seeing that right now. So I love Foden. I think he's phenomenal. But because of the return of Kevin De Bruyne, I just don't really know how that's going to impact Phil Foden. If you think that's going to improve him, I probably would jump Foden straight to the top of this list. Now, number 2, Richarlison at 6.9 million. Another player that is going to either benefit or be hindered by the absence of Son going to the Asia Cup. So the positives firstly, 0.6 XG per 90 is fantastic. And he's also hogging all of the big chances in this team at 1.17. So now that he's playing as a forward, he is basically having everything filtered through him, which is fantastic. And the fixtures long term for Spurs are really, really good. Even though they are playing away against Man United, I don't think it's a fixture that we should be looking at thinking we can't buy Spurs players in. I think Richarlison still can be brought in to your teams for game week 21 onwards. The only downside, he never plays 90 minutes. He always comes off early. Now, with Son being out, does that mean that Richarlison will be forced to play more minutes? We'd hope so, with him obviously being there. But the other question is, can he even play 90 minutes? Some players just put it all out on there for 70 and then they have to come off. Maybe Richarlison's one of those players and we never see him actually play 90 minutes. So that is a slight concern. And also, somebody like Son coming out of this Spurs team, and also Basuma, Sarr, all of these big players, is it going to really negatively impact Spurs as a general team and therefore an attacking output? And that is the only other concern that I do have with Richarlison going forward. But it's 6.9 million. With these underlying numbers, there's no denying that he's probably the best value pick of the midfielders. For that very reason, he is going to be number 2 on this list. But number 1 is going to go to Jarrod Bowen at 8.1 million. Now, it's probably quite boring because he probably is a lot of people's number 1 pick, but it's because he's safe. XG per 90 of 0.41 and expected assists of 0.15. They're not as good as Richarlison's, but we can clearly see that he is a goal scorer in this West Ham team. 13 returns in his 19 starts is also brilliant. The fixtures are good and you've got guaranteed game time. And that might seem obvious to a lot, but when I look at the other options, Richarlison comes off early. Foden could get rotated by Pep. And Jota, we have no idea. Bowen is the only one that I could absolutely say over the next 5 game weeks, he is going to play every single minute over that period, barring injuries. And that is really, really important when we are looking at a replacement for Son and Salah. We don't want players who could be benched. The only downside about him is that Kudus and Paqueta could be out for potentially game week 21. Of course, we know Kudus is out because he's going to the African Cup of Nations, but Paqueta did pick up a hamstring injury. Now, if he is available for game week 21, I feel really confident buying Bowen. But away against Sheffield United, I actually think is a real banana skin fixture. I don't think it suits West Ham at all. They are going to need someone like a Paqueta to really open up that low block of Sheffield United. And if he isn't there, I think that makes Bowen a really, really kind of worsened asset. So Bowen's going to be number 1. I think he's safe, guaranteed minutes, and I think he is long-term the player that you do want. But if you are chasing that high upside, I think Phil Foden is your man. So This is the ranking. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Bowen, Richarlison, Foden, and then Jota. So last up, we have to talk about those premium midfielders and the return of Kevin De Bruyne. Now, I've slightly cheated here and dropped Odegaard in the premium bracket because he is slightly more expensive than everybody else, but significantly cheaper than Kevin De Bruyne. So I thought this deserved a slide on its own, just to kind of give you an update on, is Kevin De Bruyne worth it at 10.2 million? And do we need to go double Arsenal midfield? That is the big questions right now. And by the way, look at these pictures. It literally looks like Kevin De Bruyne has just ran 100 marathons in 100 days. And Odegaard just looks like his sun, glowing, glorious. So Kevin De Bruyne has been done dirty in these photos. So first up, let's talk about Kevin De Bruyne. 10.2 million, 4% owned. If we're looking at a differential in the game, they don't come much better than Kevin De Bruyne. We're looking at a proven FPL asset here, 25 attacking returns last season, and he was the heartbeat of every Man City team that has progressed through to win the Premier League. The only downside about Kevin De Bruyne, well, there's a few. First up, he's been out for the entire season, so the minutes are going to be managed in my eyes. I think Pep is going to slowly integrate him back into the team. I don't think City are in a position where they have to rely on Kevin De Bruyne. He has all of the team available. Foden in great form. I think he's going to slowly integrate De Bruyne back in, potentially a start in the FA Cup, maybe some minutes in game week 21, maybe a start in game week 22, and then a full game in game week 23. And because of that reason, and being at 10.2 million, I don't think we need to be the first to buy him. I think we give ourselves an opportunity to see how he integrates back into the side. And once we see a fully fit Kevin De Bruyne playing week in, week out, then he becomes an alternative as a premium option. And the other thing that we really do need to consider, and it goes back to what I said at the start of the video, is he going to block your route to Erling Haaland? For my team personally, if I was to downgrade Salah to De Bruyne and maybe, let's say, a Son down to Bowen, I do not have the money in the bank to be able to upgrade one of my forwards to Erling Haaland. That extra price that you're paying for De Bruyne could be a problem for your Haaland plan, and you do need to consider that. So for me, De Bruyne, yes, you can go there. He'll be the ultimate differential, but I don't think you need to be the first person to buy De Bruyne. Now, the other big debate that we need to have is Odegaard. A lot of managers are currently sat there with maybe a Gabriel in defence and a Bukayo Saka. It's worth noting, I'm not even bothering putting Saka on this list because so many managers own him. I do think Saka is a fantastic option if you do want to bring him in already. But I know a lot of people have been discussing Odegaard recently at 8.4 million, 0.22 XG per 90, 0.25 expected assists per 90. His numbers were terrible at the start of the season. We're seeing a slight improvement from him over the last month or so, but still not fantastic goal threat. The good thing about Odegaard, he is a bonus point magnet, 0.72 bonus per 90. So if he does do anything good from an attacking perspective, he is going to rack up the bonus points. And the fixtures long term are fantastic. The big question we need to ask ourselves is, do we buy Odegaard alongside Saka and spend about 17 million on these midfielders? And I think the answer is no right now. Arsenal have been in a bit of poor run. I'm expecting them to return to their best very, very soon. I don't think this is a long-term thing. And I think you could, if you want to get ahead of the curve, maybe go to Odegaard, double up on that midfield. But while we have so many fantastic options available, I think I'd rather spread my money into other teams rather than double down into an Arsenal midfield that I just don't have total confidence in as we speak. So Odegaard, a great player, maybe to go to if you don't have a Bukayo Saka, but I wouldn't be doubling up with him alongside Bukayo Saka. So after ranking 13 of the replacements for Son and Salah, I have decided that these are my top 3 replacements regardless of budget. I'm hoping that each kind of section that I covered gives you a bit more detail into who is the best at each price bracket, but these are the 3 if money is no object. I think Richarlison number 3, as we discussed, we need to see how the impact of Son is going to influence Richarlison and Spurs as a team, but I think it's 6.9 million with the underlying numbers that he's putting up. Very, very difficult to ignore someone like a Richarlison. Number 2 is going to be Bowen. As we discussed, he's just the bread and butter pick. You put him in and you keep him in for 6 or 7 game weeks, and then you decide what to do after that. He is one of those that is going to continue to be fantastic FPL value as he remains as a forward or a right winger in that West Ham team. But number 1 is going to be Cole Palmer. I know he is in a lot of FPL teams right now, so maybe you are then looking at 2 or 3 to be buying for your team. But if you don't own Cole Palmer, at 5.6 million, I think you just have to bring him in. We've discussed him already. He's amazing value, and also he opens up a lot of budget for you to spend elsewhere. And maybe he's your enabler to get yourself back to somebody like an Erling Haaland. I don't think you need to overthink it. If you don't have Cole Palmer, you bring him back into your teams. But these are my top 3 replacements of the 13 that I have reviewed. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's ranking of the best Salah and Son replacements. I really hope I've covered off all the ones that are actually of note. If I have missed any, please do let me know in the comments, and I'll give you a little bit of an update on what I think on that player. But I think I've covered off the majority of them. As always, if it did provide any value, please do consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel. It'd be awesome to have you around for the second half of the season. That just leaves us to say have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Cheers.